Hello, I'm Mike. You might have seen some of my posts on a few websites about damping and suspension on scooters. There seems to be a lot of confusion about suspension on scooters. Some scooters are really well set up, some not so much. But frankly, I haven't found one that has modern high-tech suspension. All of it's pretty primitive, and you can pretty much date most of it back to about 1998 to 2000 in terms of its technology. And in order to show you what damping is, because that seems to be part of the discussion and whether it does anything for you, I've taken the shock out of my Nami Burn E-2. This scooter has the same shock front and rear, and it has a damping dial on the top which says rebound on the outside. That's this little dial here, and it has about 16 clicks from fast to slow to adjust the dampings. Now, what is the damping? I've loosened the spring on this one so I can show you. Now, damping is basically to control the speed of travel of the spring. If you had a scooter with just a spring, and a lot of you do in fact, it has no control. So when you hit a bump, it'll compress as it hits the bump, and then when it gets over the top of the bump, it'll expand, and it'll just keep on expanding, and then it'll start bouncing a little bit till it settles down. So what you get is a spring that goes down, and then up and up and down and up and down and up and down in smaller waves until it stops. So if you hit a bump going around a corner on a scooter with no damping and only a spring, it's going to start bouncing around the corner. Now, you're naturally going to slow down because you don't want that to happen. It's a nasty feeling, it's very dangerous, and your immediate reaction will be to ride slower, and from then on you'll go around corners a lot slower because you know the scooter can't do it if you've only got a spring and no damping. So what does damping do? Well, damping slows down the speed of the travel of that spring so that when it hits a bump, it doesn't go past and keep on bouncing. It basically compresses, releases, and returns back to where it started and then stops. Well, that's good damping anyway. If it's set up properly, that's pretty much what it should do. So there's two kinds of main kinds of damping. There's a few others, but none of our scooters have them, so there's no point in going into high-speed compression and rebound damping. We all have low-speed compression and rebound damping, if we have any at all. So low-speed compression damping and low-speed rebound damping affect the speed of travel of the shock in two directions. One, when you go over a bump and the spring is compressed, and another one when the spring is let go after you've got to the other side of the bump. So compression damping is when the spring is being compressed, and rebound damping is when the spring is rebounding or opening up again. So that's pretty simple to understand. Now, how it works is inside the body of the shock here you have there's a few different systems, but this one is nitrogen charged with oil. So it has an oil system that goes through some valves adjusted by this dial. It basically opens and closes those valves slowly, as well as having a nitrogen charge. The effect of that is that as you go from, I'll just set it to fast, fast to slow, the speed of compression and rebound of the shock changes. So I'll just bring that up a bit closer to the camera so you can see. So if I push this in, it's relatively easy, it takes a bit of strength, but relatively easy for me to push it in to full compression. If I let go, it comes out reasonably fast by itself. So that's the fastest amount of damping that we have on this shock. With the 1800 pound spring that's fitted as standard, that's a lot faster. You barely even notice that it's got any damping until you turn it up a little bit. Now, if I adjust the dial, if I say give it 5 clicks, it's a little bit harder to push in, and it's a little bit slower coming out again. If I give it 5 more, it gets harder again to push in and come out again, even slower. If I go to full compression and rebound, I can squeeze it in, but as you say, it takes a hell of a lot of force, and when I let it go, it comes out super slow. It's coming out, it's just that the washer and everything's in the way, so it's coming out super slow. So this dial, in fact, even though it's marked rebound, it affects both rebound and compression damping. That's pretty much like a cheap motorcycle with an adjuster on the fork or the shock, just one adjuster. They'll usually adjust both the compression and the rebound damping, and that's good. It gives you some control over the suspension. It doesn't give you utmost control, but it gives you some. So that's basically what damping is. It adjusts the speed of travel of the shock in relation to how much spring pressure and rebound pressure there is. If the spring is too heavy, then you'll hardly notice the damping. And on this little shock, the oil is probably too thin, and the nitrogen probably not charged high enough to provide the right amount of damping. It's got a circlip in the top here, so I'm going to take this out to a buddy of mine and see if he can do anything with it to start with. I believe it needs probably 50% more nitrogen and a heavier grade of oil, and what that'll do is that'll slow it down. So even at the fastest speed on this dial, it'll be slower than this. It'll be slower than what it is now, and that means when we get to the top end, when we get to the really hard end up here, it'll be even slower, and the spring won't be overcoming the damping, which means that when we adjust the damping, we'll be able to feel the effects of the quality of the ride, the quality of going around corners, the lack of bouncing under braking, and all sorts of benefits you get of having good suspension. So that's what damping is. I'm going to have a discussion about setting up preload, because I know that's what a lot of you do, and even the manuals say if you want the ride to be firmer, increase the preload. That's not actually the way that you should do it. You should be actually fitting the right spring for your weight rather than using the existing spring that's probably not designed for you in the first place. But more on that later.